The Old West wasn't just about duels and cowboy hats. It was about expansion, conflict, and a myth that turned into a cultural industry. Around 1890 in Wyoming, Dr. John E. Osborne had shoes made from the skin of the outlaw Big-Nose George Parrott. And the thief Black Bart became famous for leaving poems after robbing stagecoaches. Number 1. In 1881 in Rawlins, a mob pulled George Big-Nose Parrott out of jail and hanged him. Doctors John Eugene Osborne and Thomas McGee took the body to study the brain, in the then common search for physical signs of criminality. Osborne had the skin tanned. It became a pair of boots and a briefcase. Years later, he wore the boots at his inauguration as governor of Wyoming. The skull cap was given to a young assistant, Lillian Heath, who would become the first female doctor in the state, and used it as an ashtray, doorstop, and pencil holder. Part of the remains only resurfaced decades later in Rawlins. Today, some of that material is kept in museums in Rawlins. Number 2. John Wesley Hardin became a legend of the West by mixing fame and fear. He told the court he had killed 42 men, but newspapers of the time reported far fewer, and he liked to exaggerate. In Abilene in 1871, annoyed by the snores of his roommate Charles Cougar, he shot through the wall and killed him. Not even Wild Bill Hickok could arrest him. Captured in 1877, Hardin studied law in prison and served 17 years, getting out in 1894. The next year in El Paso, he was playing dice at the Acme Saloon when the veteran John Selman came up behind him and shot him in the head, ending the gunslinger's life. His story sums up the era: bravado, violence, and a country still learning how to enforce the law. Number 3. Fort Griffin in Texas was founded in 1867 on the banks of the Clear Fork of the Brazos, along the routes of buffalo hunts and cattle drives. It soon earned the nickname Babylon on the Brazos. Saloons, gambling tables, and brothels served a constant flow of cowboys, hunters, and outlaws. In the 1870s, law and order swung between patrols and makeshift martial law. Passing through were John Wesley Hardin, Lottie Dino, and Pat Garrett. It was also where Doc Holliday dealt cards and met Big Nose Kate, and by chance ran into Wyatt Earp, a partnership that would later shape Tombstone. The mix of fast money, a nearby army post, and an expanding frontier made the town a raw snapshot of the Texas frontier. Number 4. Charles E. Bowles, known as Black Bart, was born in England around 1829 and became a legend for robbing Wells Fargo stagecoaches between 1875 and 1883, mostly in California. He wore a flour sack as a mask, spoke politely, carried a shotgun, but there's no record of him ever firing a shot. At 2 crime scenes, he left behind verses that helped build his fame. Arrested in 1883 after 28 confirmed robberies. He served time in San Quentin and was released in 1888, saying he was done with crime. After that, he disappeared from the record. Rumors of his death in 1917 were never proven. Number 5. In the American West, Firewater became a nickname for strong liquor traded with indigenous peoples, a term that echoes the Ojibwe word ishkotawabu, liquid fire. It wasn't the bottled whiskey we picture today. In many 19th century saloons, there was rot gut made from raw alcohol, burnt sugar, and even chewing tobacco sold under names like Tarantula Juice and Taos Lightning. To show its strength, people would light it on fire, a nod to the old proof tests using flame and gunpowder. The result was cheap, harsh, and served as currency, a spark for conflicts, and the stuff of frontier legends. Number 6. In 1911, after a shootout in rural Oklahoma, train robber Elmer J. McCurdy was killed. With no family around, Undertaker Joseph L. Johnson embalmed the body with arsenic, and to cover the bill started showing it off for a nickel. Months later, fake brothers claimed the body, and it became a carnival attraction, changing hands for decades. In 1976, a TV crew was filming at the Pike in Long Beach when the dummy from the Laugh in the Dark attraction broke an arm and revealed a real human bone. Identified as McCurdy, he was finally buried in 1977 in Guthrie under concrete to make sure he wouldn't go on tour again. Number 7. Jesse James became the famous face of crime in the Old West, but many people saw his older brother Frank as the tougher hand. Along with the Youngers, they formed the James Younger Gang, robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches. In several of their heists, both employees and civilians were killed. During the failed Northfield raid in 1876, townspeople fought back and the gang fell apart. On April 3, 1882, Jesse was shot and killed by Robert Ford. Months later, Frank surrendered to Governor Thomas Crittenden, saying he had spent years in the saddle and never known peace. Tried in 1883, he was acquitted and gave up the outlaw life, working until his death in 1915 in Kearney, Missouri. Number 8. James Brown Miller, known as Deacon Jim, was a hired gun who mixed faith and violence at the end of the Old West. He went to Methodist church, didn't drink or smoke, but made his living ambushing targets, often shooting them in the back. He's officially credited with at least 12 kills, though legends claim many more. People said he wore a steel plate under his coat for protection and had survived gunfire. In 1908, his name came up in the notorious case of Pat Garrett's murder, though who really did it is still debated. The next year, after killing former U.S. Deputy Marshal A.A. Gus Bobbitt, a mob dragged him out of jail in Ada, Oklahoma, and hanged him on April 19, 1909, bringing his killer career to an end. Number 9. In the fall of 1870, along the trail between Taos and Elizabethtown, a roadside stop turned into a deadly trap. The owner, Charles Kennedy, a burly hunter and rancher, offered shelter to travelers passing through. Many never came back. His wife, who was of Ute origin, escaped to town and told people he was killing travelers for their money and silencing any witnesses, even their own young son. The news sparked local outrage. Armed men dragged Kennedy out of jail and executed him without trial. When they searched the cabin, they found bones and ashes under the floorboards. The trail went on, but no one ever forgot that dark turn. Number 10. In 1870s Kansas, a family calling themselves the Benders ran a small inn and store along a stretch of the Osage Trail in Labette County. Travelers started disappearing, until in 1873 the search for Dr. William York led neighbors to the place. In the main room, they found a trap door with bloodstains. Out in the orchard, shallow graves held bodies, many with crushed skulls and slit throats. The setup suggested the victims were lured to sit at the table, attacked from behind and robbed. The Benders fled before they could be caught. Even with rewards offered, they were never found. Their fate remains a mystery, and the case became one of the enduring legends of the Old West. Number 11. In the Old West, gamblers liked to keep their backs to the wall so they could see who was coming in. On August 2, 1876, in Deadwood at Nuttall and Mann's, later known as Saloon Number 10, Wild Bill Hickok broke that habit. The safe seat was taken by Charles Rich, so he ended up playing with his back to the door. Jack McCall walked in and shot Hickok in the head, killing him instantly. The story goes that Bill was holding aces and eights, the dead man's hand, though the exact cards are still debated. Deadwood was a lawless place at the time, and McCall was arrested soon after. The episode became legend and showed how, on the frontier, one small change in routine could decide a man's fate. Number 12. Mary Catherine Horany, known as Big Nose Kate, was born in Hungary, lost her parents, and migrated to the U.S. while still young. By 1877, she was working in the saloons of Fort Griffin, Texas, where she met Doc Holliday, a dentist and gambler who would later join Wyatt Earp in the OK Corral shootout. Their romance was stormy but turned into a partnership. When Holliday was arrested, Kate supposedly set fire to a shed to distract the town and helped him escape on horseback. Accounts differ on the details, but the story stuck in Western folklore. Years later, she lived in Tombstone and went by different names and trades, dying in Arizona in 1940. Number 13. In 19th century America, the bandana became a staple in every cowboy's gear. Cheap and tough, it was used to filter dust on cattle drives, protect the neck from the sun, work as a headband, pot holder, or even a water filter. It came from an older tradition. The bandana, spread from India, had already crossed oceans long before the West opened up. During the great cattle drives from 1867 to 1886 from Texas to Kansas, it also served as a mask during robberies and hid identities in small towns. Made of silk, the wild rag kept riders warm in the cold and soaked up sweat in the heat. A simple piece of cloth that kept people both alive and anonymous. Number 14. Born in England in 1851, Alice Ivers crossed the Atlantic as a young girl and in the rough mining towns of the West learned to play poker in Leadville. She soon became a sensation in Creede at Bob Ford's saloon, the man who killed Jesse James. She earned the nickname Poker Alice, and one night in Silver City she won about $6,000 at the table, a fortune at the time. In 1913, already the owner of a resort near Sturgis, soldiers from Fort Meade stormed her place. Alice fired back, killed soldier Fred Kutzla, and was ruled to have acted in self-defense, facing no charges. Later came arrests for running a brothel and selling liquor. In 1928, she was pardoned by the governor. She died in 1930, a legend of cards, cigars, and survival. Number 15. Born in Canada in 1871, Pearl Hart grew up hearing stories about the West and got inspired after seeing Buffalo Bill's show. By 1899, in the Arizona Territory, she teamed up with Joe Boot, a miner. Deep in debt, they decided to rob a stagecoach running between Globe and Florence. On May 30th, Pearl cut her hair short, dressed in men's clothes, and armed, took about $430 from the passengers. 6 days later, a posse caught them. She became a national headline, escaped from the Tucson jail in October, and was recaptured. Acquitted of the robbery, she was convicted for tampering with the mail and sent to Yuma Prison. In 1902, she was pardoned by the governor. Number 16. In 1860, businessmen launched a lightning-fast route between St. Joseph, Missouri and Sacramento, California. 1,966 miles, almost 3,200 kilometers, covered on horseback in about 10 days. With the gold rush and migration heading west, there was a gap between the railroads and the Pacific. The system was straightforward but grueling. Horses were swapped every 10-15 miles, and riders every 75-100 miles, running day and night. It was expensive, up to $5 per half ounce, but it delivered stock quotes, newspapers, and letters faster than anything else could. On October 26, 1861, the telegraph connected both ends and shut down the route. In just 18 months, the Pony Express had already become a legend of the West. Number 17. In 1855, Jefferson Davis secured $30,000 from Congress to test camels in the arid West. In 1856, the first ones arrived from the Mediterranean and the Middle East to Texas, based at Camp Verde. Expeditions like Edward Beale's heading toward Colorado proved the animals could carry about 600 pounds, travel long distances, and needed very little water. Even so, soldiers hated the smell, claimed the camels scared the horses, and said they were hard to handle. With the Civil War, the project lost support. After 1865, the Army sold or released around 70 camels, and some ended up in circuses. Number 18. Scalping didn't start with just one people. There's evidence it existed before colonization, and with the arrival of Europeans, colonial governments began paying bounties for scalps, spreading the practice across the frontier wars. The Apaches were involved, but the Great Eastern Mountain Range is called the Appalachians because of the Appalachee, a different nation. In the 19th century, the violence continued. In 1864, in Missouri, Confederate guerrilla William Bloody Bill Anderson led the Centralia Massacre. Reports describe scalping and mutilation of Union soldiers after the battle. It was a late echo of decades of bounties and revenge. Number 19. On stormy nights, a bluish glow can appear on metal points, masts, and even horns. It's St. Elmo's fire. Electrical discharges that ionize the air when the electric field spikes, sometimes with a faint hiss, signaling that the atmosphere is about to let loose. For centuries, sailors saw the glow and took it as a good sign, linking it to their patron saint. In the American West, there were reports of the light appearing on cattle horns. In aviation, it shows up along wing edges and lightning rods, a reminder that the sky is fully charged. Number 20. For a long time, Westerns painted the cowboy as a lone white man. But on 19th century ranches, the scene was different. Studies show that about 1 in every 4 cowboys was black. Many had already been working cattle in Texas before the Civil War. When the war came, they took charge of herds and land. After emancipation, they kept at it, driving cattle, breaking horses, and competing in rodeos, because that work offered pay and a bit of independence. The fame, though, went to Hollywood, which erased their faces from the screen. Even so, their skill and culture helped shape the West that America still remembers today. Number 21. In the American West, bounties did exist, but dead or alive didn't mean anyone had free rein to kill. It just ensured payment if the capture ended in death. Proof was essential. Once visual records became common, authorities and newspapers began photographing outlaws' bodies to close cases and stop rumors. Jesse James in 1882 and the Daltons in 1892 became famous examples. The idea of corpses being propped up is a myth. They were almost always shown lying down or in coffins. That ritual helped bring a sense of peace to the community and reminded people that the law was pushing forward, even in places once ruled by brute force. Number 22. In the American West, the saloon was a place to meet, gamble, do business, and sometimes get into a nasty fight. The first ones weren't like the fancy movie versions, just wooden floors, a bar, and simple drinks. In Dodge City, the Long Branch became famous. Bought by Chalk Beeson and William Harris, it even had an orchestra and took its name from Long Branch, New Jersey. They say it started from a bet between cowboys and soldiers. In 1879, a duel between Frank Loving and Levi Richardson ended in death. In 1885, a fire swept through Front Street and the bar never reopened. Today, there's a recreation of it at the Boot Hill Museum, built decades later. Number 23. Tatanka Iyotake, known as Sitting Bull, led the Hunkpapa Lakota and brought together allies who defeated Custer at Little Bighorn in 1876. Later, he took his people into exile in Canada, and, driven by hunger, surrendered to the U.S. on July 19, 1881, being taken to the Standing Rock Agency. In 1885, he was allowed to join Buffalo Bill's show for 4 months, earning $50 a week and selling autographs during stops in the U.S. and Canada. He returned to the reservation and in 1890 was killed during an attempted arrest connected to the ghost dance movement. Number 24. In the 19th century American West, most towns started out with far more men than women. On average, it was about 3-to-1. During California's gold rush in 1850, it reached more than 10-to-1. To keep customers in the saloons, owners hired dance hall girls, women who sang, danced, and chatted, earning commissions from drink sales. Not all of them sold sex. Many set their own rules, chose their dance partners, and could make good money. Some were hurdy-gurdy girls, immigrants who made a living playing music and dancing. As railroads expanded and families moved in, the gender balance began to even out, and saloons lost some of their central role. Number 25. Geronimo, born in 1829 as Goyale, in what was then Mexican territory near present-day New Mexico, led the Badonkohe Apache and their allies in raids and escapes from reservations between 1850 and 1886, fighting against both Mexican and U.S. troops. After years of pursuit, he surrendered in September 1886 to General Nelson Miles and was held as a prisoner of war until his death in 1909 at Fort Sill. In his later years, he accepted Christian rites, sold bows, arrows, and autographs, and appeared at the 1904 World's Fair, becoming a symbol of resistance forced to adapt under colonial pressures. In 1851, near Llanos, soldiers killed his mother, wife, and children, an event that fueled his lifelong war against the Mexicans.